what are we talking about today?
Well, I was thinking we should talk about visibility. It's one of those things I think a lot of people understand when they're thinking about developing in their career. They've understood from somewhere that they need to be visible. And so their first go-to place is being visible on LinkedIn, which we love. The community of
Yeah.
people who are watching this have found us all from LinkedIn. So I have immense respect for LinkedIn. And I'm not sure it's solving people's visibility issues as much as they would like or think, or, I'm just not sure it's the first place to go to. So what do you think, ladies? Is it a good go-to place when you're trying to develop visibility?
I think it depends what you're trying to be visible for or who. If you're wanting to get on within your institution, going to LinkedIn, which is kind of outside your institution, is not necessarily the place. Within your institution, if you want to raise your visible profile, you want to put yourself forward for projects or internal staff networks, informal arrangements. You want to approach colleagues in other areas who have either a cognate discipline that would benefit what you do or an area you're interested in. Ask them for if they wouldn't mind sparing half an hour for a cup of tea or a virtual chat so that you can learn from them. That's how you gain visibility, within an institution. LinkedIn is external facing, so I think it has its real value when you're looking to build your network beyond your internal networks. If you're looking to transition from a specialism or from one area into another in terms of your career, make shift focus, or if you're job hunting, it can be helpful for understanding the structures and organizations out there, opportunities out there. There are some great people on there that are really helpful to follow, and there's great resources and training. But I think it all comes back to, what does visibility mean to people? And what are they really looking for from what they do to be visible?
I think it's interesting as well. I had a chat with somebody in the messages on LinkedIn the other day, and his headline was something like extensive higher education experience. And then it was only after I'd looked at his profile, I discovered he was a headhunter. And I was like, why doesn't your headline say that? Like, if you're in the recruitment game, put that front and center. I think even people who are using it for very focused business purposes sometimes get the visibility bit a little skewed.
I think if you've never been on LinkedIn before, I would suggest the first thing you do is not put anything much up.
Yeah.
You need to start following people, interacting with other people to work out and understand how the dynamics of the space work. I think one of the things I am very mindful of now, I have a bit more of an external visibility on LinkedIn, is if someone comments on something and I'm not connected with them, I'm not familiar with them, I always look at their profile and check out their kind of perspective they might be coming from or their background, because it's very easily to accidentally offend somebody or something by taking something in isolation, one comment that someone has put on a post and responding to it. It's always really good to understand some context around it and where that person might be coming from. And I think it's important to be careful because it's exposing as much as it's visible. You put a comment on there. Do you really want your vice chancellor to be able to read it, and your senior director? It's extremely transparent very, very quickly. So you do need to be mindful of that exposure.
Yeah, sometimes I see things and I think, would you say this at work in front of your boss, or would you say, and if you would, okay, fair enough, you're being transparent and authentic. There's maybe a point in that column, but can you also maybe think about bringing kindness and understanding into the world and not more toxic horribleness? I'm just always astounded by sometimes what people will say when they're being their professional selves. It's, because I think it comes back to that visibility. Why are you trying to be visible? What are you trying to be known for? What is your personal brand? Who do you want people to know you for? And it's absolutely getting that audience right, or knowing who your audience is to decide how you want to become more visible, and getting involved in projects. Once you know what it is that you're trying to trying to accomplish in that visibility drive, you can decide where your effort is best put.
I've got nearly 12,000 connections on LinkedIn now. And so I was walking through the Excel Centre one day, and in like big exhibition spaces, like in the Excel Centre, you can see into some of them. And I looked into one that was completely empty, and it had a capacity of like 9,000. And I was like, that's basically what I do every day, is like speak into the void that is, not like 12,000 people's phones or computers. Yeah, it kind of blows your mind a little bit to think about how connected we actually are.
But not to assume that the depth of that connection, I think, is really important, because what I was visualizing what you were describing, and I was thinking, but 3/4 of them are looking the other way. They're not necessarily engaging regularly, or they're not, the algorithm's not throwing stuff up, or they're just logging in every couple of weeks and they're not picking up what you're doing. You are usually speaking to a subset of people who are more closely engaged.
Or it's like the venue have drawn the curtain across the LinkedIn algorithm only shows your content to a small proportion of your followers or whatever.
Yes, because you put a link in it or something like that, or you didn't put a picture in it, I think LinkedIn's really valuable if you're first stepping into it, to learn from others, to follow people, to see what they post, to read the articles and things that people then can connect with. But you need to, again, be discriminating with who you're following and think about the quality of the content, the pertinence of it. As a holding point, I would say I think it's very helpful to have a up-to-date CV style LinkedIn profile. I think it is helpful if you're going to be looking externally for employment or working on external projects, for people to be able to look you up, and to have a professional, it can be helpful. It authenticates your existence because you can validate certain things. If you've got where you were employed, it makes people feel more comfortable that person is who they say they are. So I do think if you're going to be on it, you need to make sure you've got a professional photograph and that the stuff is accurate in there. This is not a place for gently enhancing your CV, because there'll be too many people that will call you out on it.
I do think there are some roles that could use LinkedIn better. So I was doing some work with a department that is a commercial department of a UK higher education institution. And so a couple of the people in that team are sales people, basically. And so for one of them, we did some work around how they're using LinkedIn as like a shop front. So when they're doing that outreach to corporate organizations, because she was like, yeah, but they're not looking at me, they're looking at the institution. I was going, no, I'm sure if they've got a meeting set in the calendar with you, they will look you up. So actually using your about section as like your shop front to explain a little bit about your process and what will happen when you meet with them can be so helpful to just orientate them to how they're going to interact with you. So I think there are some roles where actually you can use LinkedIn very intentionally. The other thing that I've seen really well is a surprisingly high number of people will just ping me a message and go, hi Fiona, I'm thinking about becoming a coach. Can I have 20 minutes to chat about your experience? I'm like, yeah, of course. I love putting it out there now. I love a virtual coffee with someone who's considering making that move. Really happy to answer any questions that people have. So that's the other thing. If you're thinking about using LinkedIn from a job change perspective, actually just being in the messages and chatting with people who do the type of job that you want to do, so helpful. So helpful. Except that not everybody's going to reply or be receptive, but you can definitely
I was going to say, some people aren't going to reply, and it is annoying when someone messages you with what they want, if that makes sense. So I want to do this. What do I need to do about this? They want sort of walking through something that I don't necessarily have the capacity to support them with, or they haven't done their research. Just check your facts, just be careful about that kind of thing. Because that is a little bit annoying. But also don't send a message that just like says something like, hi.
Yep.
I'm not going to reply.
No, and you're right about that, like fact checking as well. Like read the about section of the person that you're contacting.
Try and recognize that you might be taking up their time. So same when you're approaching a mentor, you always want to be very specific about what you're approaching someone about. And it might be, it's better to be engaging with some of their content perhaps first before you completely cold approach someone, because they might not pick up your message or really be able to contextualize why on earth you would be approaching them. Whereas if they've seen some of your comments, they might be like, oh, they've done the homework, they know what they're doing. On the subject of comments, sometimes you will get comments that you may not agree with, and where the person doing the commenting makes themselves look like a bit of a twit. Just let that speak for itself. You don't always need to engage with it. You definitely don't need to argue with it. You don't need to justify. I would just remember if someone's saying something that's particularly critical or particularly unfair or particularly inappropriate, that the majority of the people in that space will recognize that that's what's there. You don't necessarily need to leap in there, because that can get you into more of a pickle. So just be cautious about, if you get incensed about something, about taking a moment before you reply to any comment.
And yes, and I've had a couple of experiences where actually the comments have been quite humbling, where I've written a post and I've thought it was a great perspective. And I'm like, look, I'm being clever. Here's my idea or my thought or my perspective. And then the comment section is full of such thoughtful contributions from people going, actually, here's this other perspective that you might not have thought of, or actually, here's how that affects me, or actually, these are some of the things that affect this situation that you might not have experienced that I have experienced. And those are so helpful, like really, really, just so, humbling, I think, to have people really thoughtfully engage in my work in that way. I really, really appreciate it, as long as it's genuine and intended to be about encouraging thought and perspective sharing. And
there's kind of two perspectives. I always think when I'm writing content for LinkedIn, I'm always mindful that I either need to write from my own experience in a reflective way. So I'm very clearly saying, like, this is something I've experienced, or this is a suggestion that's worked for me. I'm not saying this is the only way, and I'm not saying this is the definitive way. Or if I'm talking about something that's more empirical, that I reference where I get my data from, because there's nothing more infuriating than, fake news and things on LinkedIn and everything. But that you will get called out on it if you haven't checked your sources and haven't, if you're referencing things. And when people drop statistics in, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean anything. I'm not going to engage with it, or you might get drawn down a track you don't want to go down. So I think it's important to think about what you're trying to represent in that visible space. Are you trying to demonstrate your competence of your subject area? Are you trying to broaden your own horizons in terms of the network and therefore engaging with people? Are you trying to learn about different opportunities? What is your purpose behind your engagement with others on LinkedIn? Just as much, if it's about your visibility, you can't just go and virtually shout at people about yourself the whole time. They're not going to engage with you. They're not going to listen to you. It has to be mutual relationship building.
But it can also lead to really productive, collaborative opportunities. For example, this very episode.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that is definitely the moment to end on a high.